In July 2008, a man named Felice Tufano woke up to a reality that shouldn't exist. He was a developer standing on the edge of a $100 million dream in Coral Spring, Jamaica. But when the sun hit the shore that morning, the dream was gone. 400 meters of pristine, sugar-white sand had been erased. Not by a storm, not by the tide, but by a ghost convoy of 500 trucks. How do you steal a beach? How do you move 13,000 tons of the earth itself without a single person hearing a sound? And why, after 18 years, hasn't a single person spent a night in a jail cell for it? Tonight, we aren't just looking at a robbery, we are looking at the birth of the sand mafia. This is the deconstruction of the heist that broke the laws of physics and the laws of man. The parish of St. Anne sits on Jamaica's north coast, roughly midway along the island's length. It contains some of the most visited coastline in the Caribbean, home to resort towns, dive sites, and beaches that have appeared on tourism promotional material for decades. The specific site in question, commonly referred to in reports as Coral Spring, had been acquired by a private Jamaican developer in the years prior to the incident. The plan was high-end tourism infrastructure, villas, amenities, direct beach access. The land value was tied almost entirely to the quality and extent of the shoreline. Construction was underway. The project was live. Then on the night of July 16th, a coordinated extraction operation removed the entire beach. When site workers arrived the following morning, they found the shoreline unrecognizable. The sand layer that had accumulated over centuries of natural sediment deposition was gone. What remained was the raw substrate underneath, rock and compacted earth, directly exposed to the ocean. The Jamaican Constabulary Force was contacted. So was the National Environment and Planning Agency, the government body responsible for overseeing land use and natural resource management across the island. What they found at the site confirmed the obvious. This was not an act of nature. 13,000 cubic meters. That is the volume of sand that vanished from Coral Spring. To move that much mass, you don't need a crew. You need an army. A standard dump truck used in construction and quarrying typically carries between 10 and 15 cubic meters of loose material per load, depending on the truck class. To empty this beach, you need over 500 individual loads. In a 6-hour window of darkness, that is one truck arriving, loading, and departing every 43 seconds. Think about the precision required. This isn't a highway. This is a narrow limestone-carved dirt path in rural Jamaica. If one driver stalls, the entire operation collapses. This required a stage commander, someone standing on the ridge with night vision optics, in orchestrating a ballet of heavy machinery in total blackout. No headlights, just the low, guttural rumble of diesel engines. The excavation equipment required to strip sand from a coastline at that rate is heavy, loud, and visible. The trucks themselves, moving in convoy or in rotation through the same route, would have been identifiable by sound alone from significant distance. And yet, no one called the authorities during the operation. No alarms were triggered. No one was intercepted. Authorities initially struggled to understand how an operation of this physical scale could be executed in near total darkness, logistically, organizationally, and practically, without generating a single contemporaneous report. The locals in the nearby village of Duncans claimed they heard nothing. But physics says otherwise. 50 idling engines create a decibel level equivalent to a jet taking off. Someone, somewhere, would have seen something. So if the village didn't hear it, it means they were paid not to, or they were too terrified to listen. The absence of witnesses was not accidental. Investigators working the case encountered what is sometimes referred to in law enforcement contexts as a community silence. A situation in which people with relevant information choose, for various reasons, not to come forward. This is distinct from a genuine absence of witnesses. It is a collective decision, whether coordinated or individually arrived at, to remain uninvolved. The reasons for this are complex and cannot be reduced to a single explanation. In economically marginalized communities, large-scale operations that generate short-term income, even illegal ones, often create informal networks of support and complicity. Truck drivers, loading crews, road watchers, people paid to work and paid, implicitly or explicitly, to forget. Why sand? To a tourist, it's just something to sit on. To the sand mafia, it's white gold. In the mid-2000s, the Caribbean was in a construction fever. Multi-billion-dollar resorts were popping up like wildfire. But there was a problem. Not every beach is born equal. Some have rocks. Some have dark volcanic silt. But the ultra-wealthy, they want the white stuff. The global sand trade is worth $70 billion a year. It's more valuable than the illegal timber trade and more widely used than oil. And in 2008, the demand in Jamaica hit a breaking point. Felice Tufano's beach was a target. It wasn't just sand, it was the perfect grain. When the police arrived, they found deep industrial tire tracks. They tracked them to the main road, and then they vanished. The trucks had blended into the morning traffic of the island's construction boom. But sand leaves a trail, not a digital one, but a mineral one. Enter the geologists. This is where the heist meets forensic science. Every beach has a DNA, a specific mix of crushed shells, quartz, and coral that is unique to that specific coordinate on the map. The Jamaican police began raiding rival resorts. They took samples from the newly white beaches of some of the biggest developers on the island, and they found the match. The sand from Coral Spring was sitting under the lounge chairs of two multi-million-dollar rival hotels. They had the evidence, they had the mineral signature, they had the trucks. The trap was set. The world was watching, and then the system broke. In the Caribbean specifically, the combination of environmental regulation, limited land area, and high development pressure has created a persistent illegal sand market. Beaches are extracted, sold to construction supply chains, and replaced, on paper, with legitimately sourced material that frequently doesn't arrive. For whoever organized the Coral Spring extraction, 500 truckloads of Caribbean beach sand represented a significant profit. Estimates at the time suggested the market value of the stolen material ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Against that number, the operational costs, equipment hire, crew payment, transport, bribes if any were involved, were manageable. The economics made sense. The law didn't particularly seem to matter. Sand, unlike most stolen commodities, cannot be easily concealed. It has to be moved, stored, and ultimately used. And 500 truckloads showing up somewhere in the Jamaican construction and supply chain leaves a trace. Abnormal inventory, unusual pricing, delivery records without originating documentation. Investigators began cross-referencing active construction projects across the region with procurement records, looking for discrepancies between reported material costs and the volume of work underway. They spoke to suppliers, they looked at plant and equipment hire logs, they followed the routes. The case developed over subsequent months. But Jamaica isn't a textbook. It's an ecosystem of power. As the investigation moved from the beaches to the boardrooms, things started to get quiet. Witnesses who had been vocal suddenly suffered from collective amnesia. Key police files, physical folders containing the forensic reports, simply walked out of high security stations and never returned. The Prime Minister, Bruce Golding, stood before the nation and promised a crackdown. But behind the scenes, the sand mafia was flexed its muscles. We're talking about developers with ties to the highest levels of government, people whose resorts were the cornerstone of the national economy. If you prosecuted them, you weren't just catching a thief. You were sabotaging the GDP of the country. The director of public prosecutions eventually made a shocking announcement. The charges were being dropped. The reason? Insufficient evidence. The forensic sand matches ruled inconclusive in the face of political pressure. The truck drivers? They claimed they were just following orders from anonymous contractors. The heist was perfect because it didn't end when the sand was moved. It ended when the law was forced to look at a mountain of evidence and call it a molehill. If you think this is just a story about a beach in Jamaica, you're missing the bigger picture. Coral Spring was the proof of concept. It proved that in the 21st century, you can steal the environment itself if you have enough trucks and enough friends in high places. Since 2008, night resource laundering has become a global epidemic. In India, sand kings kill journalists who try to film their illegal dredging operations. In Canada, the Great Maple Syrup heist saw 3,000 tons of syrup, worth $18 million, siphoned into water-filled barrels over the course of a year. In Romania, entire ancient forests are being ghost-logged, disappearing into the global supply chain before the satellites can even update their maps. These aren't crimes of desperation. These are crimes of the industrial shadow. They require a level of 3D logistics that rivals any Fortune 500 company. They are stealing the foundations of our world, and they are doing it while we sleep. Felice Tufano's $100 million resort was never built. The investors fled. The site remains a jagged limestone scar on the coast of Trelawney. The rival resorts, they're still there. Their guests are currently laying on sand that belongs to a dead dream. They don't know, they don't care. But the next time you stand on a beach, or cross a bridge, or look at a forest, ask yourself, is this supposed to be here? Or am I standing on a crime scene that was too big to be solved? I'm the narrator for Bedtime Heists. We're moving into the shadows of the industrial world. In our next episode, The Siphon. How a group of thieves stole $18 million of liquid gold without ever breaking a lock. If you're still awake, subscribe. The world is a lot emptier than it looks. Sleep well.